Welcome back. Mile 40 is rocking and rolling, and I am very excited to join you all today with a very special guest. Cody Jefferson is a father, entrepreneur, public speaker, life and business coach, and he is the founder of Embrace the Lion. Cody is noted as the guy that 7 to 10 figure founders hire to continue scaling without sacrificing their souls on the altar of their success. Cody's story is pretty deep, and I'm going to do something a little bit different this episode, something that I haven't done on previous episodes. Instead of having Cody kind of walk through his story and share it with us, I think he has a lot to share. And so I kind of want to run through some of the details and give you guys some background here. Cody went through a very public divorce in 2016. He then went on to become a single parent. His younger brother went to prison. He ended up burying 8 family members and friends in unrelated tragedies, including an 18-month-old niece, his mentor and his hero, his best friend of 17 years, and his little sister. He found himself dying in a hospital bed, septic, and in complete adrenal and hormonal shutdown due to stress and anxiety of all of the above, all while trying to show up and play the role of a pastor. He was a pastor to that point of up to 13 years. They called his family in because he wasn't supposed to make it. He had been able to sustain throughout all this. And while he loved his season of occupational ministry, it became clear that he was sacrificing his soul on the altar of success. Cody, that is a lot for someone to take in about 30 seconds of me kind of, feeding.
So it's funny, as a communicator, somebody who speaks for a living, and for being a pastor for so long, all I've done is, stages for 20 years. There's a relative threshold of pain that you walk people through. So you want your story, anytime you're walking somebody through a narrative, you want it to be relatable so they can insert themselves in the story. This was sales and anything else. You want them to feel like they're a part of it. There comes a point, though, which is why I'm very careful with the amount of information that I share in my story at any given time, because it reaches that point where it's like, well, I can't relate to this anymore. That's a lot of trauma in a short amount of time. And it is absolutely. But by the way, it's good to be here.
Thank you. So all this happened within the last 6 years.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack a little bit. What was life before 2016 like?
Dude, so life wasn't bad.
Okay.
I found myself in occupational ministry at 19. And so there was before that, I managed a garage through high school. I did really well in school. I don't have barely graduated. I was top of my class, did really well academically. Managed a garage, I'm a licensed barber. So I've been wrenching on cars and cutting hair for 20 something years now. At 19, I found myself in a coffee shop with the owner of the garage that I was managing, because I didn't want to go to church. He kept inviting me. Find myself, because I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, very, very small, never knowing that coffee shops could exist inside of churches, let alone they could look like concert halls. And so I find myself here, actually really like it, fall in love with it. No real burning bush moment, no dream on top of a mountain, God didn't speak to me. It was just that I loved people. Obviously, I loved working with them. I loved serving them. I was a musician, still am. I was a professional musician for 10 years throughout my ministry tenure. And so there were some pieces at 19 in the charismatic evangelical megachurch that made a lot of sense. I was good on stage. I wasn't bad to look at. I could speak well. I could sing. I could play an instrument. And really, that was all you needed. Hey, let's put him on stage and let's see how he does. And that began a really beautiful season of ministry. Yeah. So the problem came into play as I walked through. And yes, I ended up getting married when I was in ministry. We had a son, as my son Stetson.
Sure.
We are amazing co-parents now. But what happened, and I think many people can relate to this, I got involved in ministry or in serving people so early, really, because one, I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
Two, I was for as confident as I was actually pretty insecure. And it gave me a sense of purpose.
Yep.
And it allowed me to fix things. It allowed me to, obviously mechanic, barber, allowed me to fix things. And so long as I was fixing things, so long as I was useful, I felt that I had value. The problem came into play because my job was God and God was my job.
Sure.
And I didn't know where one ended And I grew up hearing that there was so much potential in my life from the time I was a kid.
Sure.
I'm 8 years old playing piano at church, and all I'm hearing is God's going to do such big things through you. He's got such a plan for you. Cool. Awesome. But as somebody who puts a lot of pressure on themselves, I didn't know what that meant. It just meant that I can't ever say no. I can't stop. I can't shut it off, because if that's the case, that I'm not living up to my potential, and I'm letting God down, and then I'm letting my family down, and then I'm not worth loving, and I don't know who I am. So it created this really interesting vacuum of being a yes man, of overworking, of overcommitting myself, of putting my family on the back burner, saying it was for them. Right? This is for you. This is all for you. Like, you just have to understand there's this call in my life. No, it was actually because of my own insecurities. And so that's where the whole sacrificing your soul on the altar of your success, that whole tagline comes from, is so many times we'll make excuses and justify it through saying that we're doing something for our family because of the way that we were raised or some trauma that we experienced, when really we're just putting it back on them. It just may, it may just be a different color. And
sorry, didn't mean to cut off. No, you had said something interesting as you were kind of explaining, that potential that was laid upon you, and the idea of like, you could do so much. But one thing kind of stood out to me in the context of all this. A lot of this was human expectation. What would you say, was your level of, your spirituality at that point at a young age?
That's a great question. I didn't really even know. Like, I grew up in the Baptist church. Yeah. My grandfather was a deacon. We traveled and did gospel singing conventions. Like, it was a good time. I understood service. I understood that we took care of people. We took them meals. We went to the hospital all the time. I understood all of that side of things. As far as a deep theological understanding, there was a lot that I couldn't reconcile. And I wasn't unintelligent. And so some of the framings and ideas behind my religious practice didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Not on paper. And so, again, getting into working for the church at 19, genuinely, I had a very sincere heart, but I had no theological understanding of what I was doing. Who does? I mean, honestly, who does at 19?
No, that's true. I guess to dig in a little bit deeper, was there ever a feeling within you that you were put on this earth for this purpose, to serve others? Or did that maybe come about later?
Sure. Well, I think the way that I was raised, that is the purpose. I mean, that's the purpose for everyone.
Yeah.
To go and to bear fruit, to bear the kingdom of God on earth, as it is in heaven, to be all things to all people, to be a servant, which, I mean, really is to put yourself last and to put everyone else first. And that is the expectation.
Sure.
It's not sustainable, but it wasn't sustainable for me, but that is the expectation. So what I've learned over time is that my potential, my purpose is everywhere. It's in everything that you do. Like, this conversation is part of my purpose. When I pick my son up from school today, that's part of my purpose. When I put on wrestling shoes and we go to wrestling practice tonight, that's part of my purpose. Right? When I wake up in the morning and go through a morning routine and I let my dogs outside, that's part of it's everything.
Yeah.
And potential, I've learned, isn't so much something that God is calling you to live up to as an expectation, but it's a promise that you get to live from. And so it takes some of the pressure off.
Yeah.
And so for me, the conversation now is, if it makes sense towards who I'm becoming. So purpose is, who do I say that I am, and who do I want to become in this life?
Yeah.
And in mapping that out and getting very, very quantifiable with that, right? Then I set a series of frameworks in order, and I set parameters in my life, and I set boundaries in my life, and I set habit structures in my life that confirm that identity. Do I always feel like it? No. Do I always feel like going to the gym? No. Do I always feel like eating healthy? No. Do I always feel like doing certain things? No. But you do them because it confirms who it is that you say that you are. So I live by the mantra now that, like, this is who I am, so this is what I do.
Got it. And at what point was that mantra kind of developing or starting to become instilled?
I would say 2000. So in 2017, I stepped out of occupational ministry. People ask me why I say that. And it's because I feel like I'm more a pastor now than I was then. Mm-hmm. It's just the pulpit, was preparation for this platform.
Sure.
And I don't have any of the politics that I need to adhere to. And there's nothing that's off limits for me to say. And there's no ways in which, I have limits on how I can walk with people.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I would say in 2017, mm-hmm. that's really when this crystallization started to happen. And I started to really shift my identity and started to really shift into who I believe that next evolution and next version of myself, as Todd Herman called, like that alter ego effect, who that kind of 2.0 version of me is, and who I would want my son to look at and be like, man, I want to be just like you, Dad.
Got it.
And live it out.
And for context for the listeners, sure. The timeline is that, in 2016, you had gone through your divorce, mm-hmm. which was public in nature.
Yeah. Because I was a pastor. There was no big scandal or anything. Like it wasn't it wasn't anything cool.
Yeah. But you're a figurehead. Anytime there's a figurehead and, it's like the CEO of a company going through a divorce, essentially.
Exactly. And there was that's not why I stepped out of ministry. I stepped out of ministry because continuing to say yes in the midst of everything that was walking through, never getting a break, never being able to give myself, like it was killing me.
Yeah.
And I recognized that over a 2-year period, I had 5 other friends in ministry put guns in their mouths and take their own lives due to the stress and overwhelm of having to be on all the time and not knowing how to comprehend putting yourself first, because it's not what we're taught to do. Yeah. So that's really where Embrace the Lion came from.
Yeah.
And that's where this confirmation of identity came from.
I love that for so many reasons. I mean, I think first and foremost, one of the things that I'm intentional about is being open about my failures, because, and we had talked about this before, my father is a spiritual leader as well. He's a priest. And one of the things that I've noticed over time is that expectation of just being perfect all the time. And, making it known to others that, failure is normal. We're all human. We all go through, our own shit, and it just, it's part of life. And no one is perfect, essentially. When you made that decision to step away, was that a decision you made on your own, or did you have, mentors guiding you at that point?
So I didn't have any at the time. Okay. All of my mentors were pastors. Mm-hmm. And so I can't say that I didn't have mentors. I didn't have anyone in my ear saying, this is what you should do. Mm-hmm. It was a time where I recognized that I had been listening to what everybody else wanted for my life for so long that I was going to listen to myself, and I was going to bet on myself. And so no, there was no outside ear. This was a decision that I made to take my life back and to create something and to lead in a way that I felt I'm very mindful to use words like called or anything else. Sure. Like I feel like they've been manipulated ad nauseum. Sure. I think the whole idea of purpose has been manipulated ad nauseum by personal development and by charismatic evangelicalism. Yep. I think we've made it a commodity and a sellable product, and your purpose isn't a sellable product. It is not something you just find. It's something that you create. And so I recognized that this is what I wanted my purpose to include, and that I was made for it. Like you walk through that much and you recognize, okay, shoot, maybe I'm built a little different, and maybe I have a capacity inside of me, and maybe there's a reason for all of this. And maybe there's lessons inside of all of this trauma and tragedy. And maybe the ways in which I've lived up to this point, which in some ways are frustrating, in some ways are embarrassing, in some ways feel like a failure. And in some ways I have failed. I don't have to assign myself the identity of being a failure. How can I learn from this? And how can I then transform all of this trauma so that I don't then transmit it to other people?
What was your level of conviction at the time, when you had decided to bet on yourself? You had mentioned that.
I was so in. Listen, I was like, dude, I was scared.
Yeah.
It's not like God had charted out the path for me and I just knew. No, bullshit. No, dude. Yeah. I just knew that this felt right to me. But I did not have like the super sexy story of, like I left, I quit my job, and dude, within 6 days, I had made my first six figures, and like, here's my 97 course on how you can do the same.
This isn't that entrepreneurial, I quit corporate America and then, started and founded a company.
No, dude, I started sharing my story online. I started sharing what I was walking through. I started sharing that I didn't actually know what, I needed to figure out what I believed.
Yeah.
I needed to deconstruct everything because I wasn't sure if I was indoctrinated to believe this. I wasn't sure if I was just paid, saying what I was paid to say. And that's what I'm supposed to believe. I didn't know. And I had studied this academically for 10 years, but I wasn't sure. I'm I need to figure this out for myself. And there was no framework on how to create the life that I wanted. And that's where all this started. It's okay, I'm not setting out to build some program for men. I'm really just setting out to save my life and to build a framework for my life that's sustainable, that allows me to be the man and the father that I'm called to be.
Got it.
And that's where this started.
Got it.
But it wasn't sexy, dude. I was flipping Harleys out of my garage. I was, for those that don't know what that means I was taking Harleys that weren't running, getting them running, painting them, doing some fun stuff, and then selling them for a profit. I was cutting hair out of the front room of my house. I was doing graphic design. I was doing web design for local businesses. I was doing piano lessons, guitar lessons, vocal lessons. I was playing bars on the weekends. I was doing, it was just not sexy. I was doing everything. But dude, I loved it because I knew what my monthly burn was. I knew what I needed to make, and I made it. And there was something really satisfying about the fact that I was making it happen.
Was there ever any sort of backlash? Did you, for instance, run into members of your community after? Things like that. And the reason I ask is because for the context of the listeners, I want them to kind of get the picture of what your relationship was with the church after that period and where it is now, so that way we can kind of understand that.
Yeah. So when I stepped out of ministry, I obviously stopped going to the church that I was pastoring at, just so it wasn't confusing for people. Sure. I love that community. I loved everyone that I walked with. It was a very sincere and real part of my life, and a part of my evolution and my journey. I needed to take a break, dude. I hadn't had a Sunday off in 13 years. I didn't take time off. I worked 7 days a week all the time.
Yeah.
And that was normal. Yeah. So, dude, I remember the first Easter and the first Christmas where I didn't have to plan anything. And it was the most odd feeling because I'd done this since my entire 20s. This is my whole adult life. Yeah. This is all I knew was, a lot of church is production. And a lot of it is the show, and there's discipleship on the backside of that. But there's a lot of front door getting people in, your top of funnel.
Sure.
And to not be in the midst of all of that. So stepped out for a little bit, right? Again, no bad parting with my community. When I started sharing pieces of my story, when I started sharing that, there were seasons in ministry that I caught atheist flu at least once a month. I don't know what I believe. I don't know. I'm doing all these things, and I can walk with people and I can share with them, but also recognizing that I had a really cheap grace for people in my 20s. I hadn't walked through enough. On the backside of walking through everything that I walked through, I felt I did the best with what I had at the time of what I knew. But I was just so irresponsible. And so I spoke into that. I started sharing about that, how irresponsible we are to just simply pray over people like it's some magic Band-Aid. And how, Dietrich Bonhoeffer in The Cost of Discipleship talks about this idea of cheap grace and how that's what we offer. And that's never what this was supposed to be about. And there's no accountability and there's no autonomy. And that started rubbing people the wrong way. And bro, listen, for those of you that are listening or watching, or if you happen to like this and you want to look me up, I'm covered in tattoos.
Yeah.
I don't sound like someone that's covered in tattoos. That always throws people off because I don't know what they expect me to sound like. But I've got a skull on my left hand. I've got I'm covered from my knuckles all the way up my arms, on my neck, my chest, my stomach. I am I'm just a walking coloring book. And I wasn't that, and I had a few tattoos in ministry, but this was me defining who I am. I was 135 pounds in ministry. I'm like almost 180 of pure muscle now. I didn't have a beard.
Yeah. For the listeners out there,
it's a drastic change. So people would see me even now, like I'll run into people who I have not seen in years. And I am physically a very different human being. Yeah. And even from a standpoint of my confidence and my certainty in who I am, like I'm a different human being.
Got it.
And so that shakes people up at times.
Yeah. No, I can very much imagine so. It's crazy to kind of hear a story like this, because there's so many moving parts. There's who you are on the outside. There's what you looked like several years ago and what you look like now. Yeah. But I think more than anything, it's really who you are on the inside.
Absolutely.
And we haven't even dug in yet into what happened after that.
Yeah.
So, let's talk a little bit about that. I know I kind of gave the outline earlier with regards to, your family members and kind of that season, but can you give a little bit more context?
Yeah. I mean, context in which way? In like who passed or why they like?
Yeah. If you can give a little sense into the sense of the tragedies that you had to kind of face.
Yeah. And so recognize, listeners, if this could, I'll keep it as PG as possible, but this could be traumatic for you. So just understand it's going to be a lot of loss in a short period of time.
Okay.
So my son's mom let me know that she wanted to not be together, which in the moment caught me by surprise. Cause I was working a lot again, like I was 18 hours a day at the church. Like I was doing my thing. I didn't realize that I was putting a wedge. Like on paper and on social media and in front of the church, like it was perfect. I don't like, so boom, that happens. About a month later, my 18-month-old niece was murdered. And it was the worst case of sexual assault to a minor on Oklahoma record, 18 months old. I will not go into detail of that. Very traumatic.
Sure.
I then had an aunt unexpectedly pass away. My mentor of 15 years died in a motorcycle accident. My best friend of 18 years passed away of an accidental overdose. Ended up burying him on my birthday. And I'm leading all these funerals, by the way, because remember, I'm the pastor. Yeah. My sister-in-law took her own life as a result of obviously everything that was happening with her daughter. One of my best friends in ministry, somebody that I'd walked with since the beginning of my ministerial journey, took his own life, leaving behind 3 kids and a wife at his funeral. My 19-year-old sister went home for lunch, just the sweetest kid in the whole world. And someone was in her apartment, an intruder, a guy that was high, and ended up strangling her to the point of unconsciousness and held her hand as she died and led all those funerals. So there's a lot of trauma and a lot to see and a lot to witness in the course of 12 months while trying to navigate walking through a divorce and what that looks like and be a healthy co-parent and do things in an agreeable fashion and show up for my son and show up for my church community because that doesn't stop. And so long as you can keep the machine going, they're okay with you keeping the machine going. There's the platitude. If you're doing okay, you good? You all right? You good? I'm good. I'm good. What else can you be? At this point, I don't. In movies, in like war scenes, you'll sometimes see like where there's like an aftershock and there's just a ringing.
Yeah.
There's like, it's an explosion. Then like, they're just looking around, they're kind of dazed and they're just kind of going through the motion. They don't know where they're like, just kind of going. That was me. I was just going. I like every day was ringing in my ears, right? Metaphorically. And I'm good. Meanwhile, like I'm not really sleeping. Yeah. I don't really pay attention to that because I'm not really tired.
Yeah.
I fall asleep and have night terrors because of everything that I had seen and witnessed. And like, that's just not something that like, there's just a lot to watch in a short amount of time. And so I'm not really sleeping, I'm not really eating, but I'm not really hungry. So I don't really notice. And my son's over and I'm starting to get sick. Like I'm not feeling well. And to the point where I'm like, I'm like, this isn't normal. And I'm not okay. So I call my son's mom and we have this agreement like, hey, if you're ever like super sick or something else, just call. I'll either come or you'll come and we'll figure it out. So I called her. I'm like, dude, I'm not good. So she comes over. And by the time she gets there, I'm apparently going in and out of consciousness. I guess I'm telling her I'm fine. Like I need to take stet because like, I'm just very sick. I'm like throwing up. I'm just not okay. She's like, no, you're going to the hospital. I'm like, I'm fine. Apparently she like drugged me into like her car because I was going in and out of consciousness. Maybe I helped. I don't remember. And there I was in the hospital going septic and unconscious for 3 days. On the third day, I did rise again. And it was in that moment, dude, I was like 123 pounds. And I stood up. I was just frail looking at myself. And I had a hospital gown. I was like, how did I get this hospital gown on? Yeah. I stand up. I recognize there's nothing on under the hospital gown. So I close that up on the back because I'm not, I don't want any nurses to stumble in their walk, obviously. Like, don't check me out. I grab the IV tree. I go into the bathroom. I don't even recognize myself, dude.
Yeah.
I looked at just look dead.
Yeah.
And I started asking myself a series of questions. I'm like, who's here? And it wasn't an indictment. Yeah. It was not a question of judgment or indictment. It's just like, dude, you've been making hospital visits almost every day for 13 years.
Yeah.
Who's here? Nobody. Fuck.
Crazy. It's crazy when you think about it in the context of
I'm like,
working 7 days a week to serve others and nonstop in hospitals.
Yeah.
You've seen everything that everyone's gone through and no one was there.
I'm like, nobody's
when
here.
You're in that moment.
And it was okay. I wasn't mad at anybody.
Yeah.
I just recognized. So it was in that room. And I'm thinking to myself like, hey man, like this is the legacy you're going to leave your son. He's going to grow up and he's going to say, yeah, I didn't know my dad. He died when I was young, but I do know like, man, he really served the church hard. It killed him.
Yeah.
So it's like, he's going to be resentful to the church. Like what's going to happen here? And I was drowning and I recognized I was drowning. And when nobody was there, it was like this voice said, there's nobody obviously here. So nobody's coming to save you. So you can either keep doing what you're doing, you're going to drown, or you can swim your ass to shore and you can figure some things out.
Yeah.
And so then I asked myself this question, okay, well then what needs to die in me to become the man I said I'd be? And that's the question that is the entire, I mean, you see it right here. Like what needs to die in me? What needs to die in me to become the man that I said I'd be? That is our mantra in Embrace the Lion. That is the question every man asks himself every single day. And then we quantifiably answer it. And then we back that answer up with action. And so that started the journey of me becoming the man that I felt I was called to be, the father, the co-parent, the partner, as it would turn out, the entrepreneur, business owner, business partner, speaker, communicator, investor.
I think one thing that I really kind of want the listeners to kind of soak in from this is how you digested that moment of realizing you were in this alone.
And dude, like, so what's interesting about being a yes man and like doing all things for all people is it also gives you like a hall pass to like bitch about it.
Yeah.
So you get to be a victim to it.
Yeah.
Like, well, people just need so much from me and like, I just never get a break. And it's like, nah, you do that to yourself, but you do that to yourself so you can bitch about the way that you feel. And it somehow pacifies the dopamine that you're not getting anymore. And it's not until you can take full ownership of where you're at and take full ownership that where you're at is your fault and that everything you have and you don't have in your life is a result of choices that you've made. Right? And now we may not always be able to choose situations and circumstances that happen to us.
Yeah.
But we can choose how we respond, and we can choose how we move forward, and we can choose the tenacity with which we move forward. We can choose the ownership that we move forward through, or we can choose to be victims. And in that moment, I just refused to be a victim. And it wasn't that I was negating what I'd experienced. It wasn't that I was trying to brush it under the rug and act like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I just didn't want it to define me.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go back and be coddled by anything.
Yeah.
I needed to move forward. And I recognized, like, man, I've held too many people's hands that have died. Like, for me to take this breath, they'll never have this breath.
Yeah.
For granted. Won't do it. So I don't do it.
I like that you said you wouldn't let it define you. Actually, the subtitle of Break Barriers is how setbacks can dare you rather than define you.
Look at us all kindred right now. We're having a moment right now.
So there it is. Because for me, that was always the way that I kind of perceived setbacks through the lessons that I've learned in life was they're not there to define you. They're really just there to kind of say, hey, like, I dare you to make this better. All right. I dare you to take the cards that you've been dealt and figure out a way to work with them. Because the truth of the matter is, and I've said this before many a times, is that someone will always take your deck. Someone will always take your hand, and figure out a way to win with it.
Yeah.
And your hand, was a pretty shitty hand.
It was rough.
It was rough. But at the end of the day, there were elements of it that, you understood were learning moments.
Yeah. And even when I didn't understand, and there's a lot now that there's a lot about the loss, and like, that doesn't ever make sense.
Yeah.
Death often, especially murder and suicide, and like, those never make sense.
Yeah.
There's no rationalizing those. There's no getting over that. There's no getting over the loss of people that you love. You get through it.
Yeah.
And you figure it out as you go. And there are healthy ways to do that, and there are unhealthy ways to do that. Right. But you move through it. It's interesting. I can remember, as long as I've been aware, there's this desire, and you'll know this because of your background as well, that like we sing songs of, break my heart for what breaks yours, or take my life. And like, I want to see what you see. I want to feel what you feel when we talk about God. Like, I want to lose my life to find it. No, you don't. You actually don't. Really pretty songs to sing, really pretty words to sing on a Sunday. And then you get to go back to your comfort on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
But to actually walk through hell, to be there, to sit in it, that fire is refining, and there is no other way to be refined but through fire. And so pain and adversity are some of the greatest gifts that we can be given if we'll choose to see it that way, and not in some like weird masochistic way, but in a way that it is producing and cultivating a seasoning inside of you that cannot be formed any other way. You would not be who you are today had you not had cancer as a child. There's no way.
Yeah.
So it didn't happen to you. It did happen for you.
Yep.
Again, really cute, charismatic things to say on the backside of an experience.
Yeah.
But in the middle of it, you're not thinking, man, I'm so grateful to go through this right now. This is exactly what I wanted my childhood to look and feel like.
This is exactly what I pictured.
This is for sure what I prayed for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I think that you're absolutely right. I think adversity, and those dire moments really, to use your own word, really refine you in a way that can't be described and honestly can't be repeated. And sometimes with certain situations, you realize how you came out so much stronger out of it. In your case, I will say, obviously a lot different than my case, but you almost start to seek out. You do start to seek out more moments like that, more moments of discomfort.
You have to be careful.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with it, right? You can't go being like, Taylor Swift getting in a relationship just to write a new breakup song.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, go look. But you find that the beauty of life exists on riding that edge.
Yes, Absolutely.
And when things start to get comfortable, you recognize that there's a dissonance in your soul because you've become accustomed in a way that some people never will. So, and that's a real gift too.
Absolutely.
That the adversity has created inside of you this beacon, and an awareness that there is no course for that. You can't manufacture that. I can't teach that to you. Right? Yeah. You have to go through it. And when you can go through it and not be a victim on the other side, recognize that, okay, there might be some situations where you could identify as a victim for sure, but you refuse to. And you look for the lesson on the other side, and you look for the teaching, and you look for the wisdom, and then you implement that wisdom. Yeah, you start to ride that edge because you recognize like that's the sweet spot of life.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be comfortable. No. I want to be content, but I don't want to be complacent.
Yep. So the saying goes that, once you start to feel comfortable in a room, it's when you identify you're not in the right room.
Exactly.
And so you're absolutely spot on with that as being the sweet spot. I know we only have another 10 minutes or so. And so I want to make sure that we walk the listeners through a little bit more of how we got to where we are today. And, as we talked about before we recorded, the premise here is to walk people through that pit to peak trajectory. And we very much kind of talked about the pit. There's a lot going on there. And for all the listeners out there, look up Cody after this, because there's no, this isn't a story of like this one moment in life and then all of a sudden he bounced back. It was one thing after the other, and across different arenas of his life. But clearly it was in that period, he dug within, started to come to terms with who he wanted to be, not only to himself, but to the world around him. And he reshaped himself completely, not just from a career perspective, but also from just a day-to-day human perspective.
Sure.
And so let's talk a little bit more around what it is that you're doing today. Let's talk about, if you can just kind of break down for the listeners, what is Embrace the Lion, so they can understand that. And we can go from there.
Yeah. So it was originally Embrace the Lion of the Tribe of Judah, but God, that as a email address was super cumbersome. The original tagline was helping pastors take guns out of their mouths. That was a super weird t-shirt. So it is Embrace the Lion. It's helping good men become great and helping great men create movements. So this started in 2017 with 4 pillars: head, heart, health, and habits. So head meaning your thoughts, your belief system, what you think, what you feel; your heart, your relationships to yourself, first and foremost, to those around you, your family, and then to God, or whatever you call God. I work primarily exclusively with guys who follow the same spiritual trajectory that I do. I just talk about Jesus so much that it probably wouldn't make sense if you didn't. Mm-hmm. We have health. So that is your physical body. You got one vessel to change this world in. So we want to make sure that's in top-notch shape. Most of the guys that we walk with are former athletes or athletic in some capacity. And so we gamify all of that, and all of our guys get super shredded. And we love that because we get to be the dads that look like superheroes. And then 4th is habits. So how you treat your time. So how you treat your mind, how you treat your relationships, how you treat your body, and how you treat your time. Over the past 5 years, we have grown this into a community of just over 4,200 men all over the world. Again, helping recreate a belief system, helping to define a belief system, helping men get very, very clear on what they want in life and business. Our guys do all run companies and run businesses. And so helping get very, very clear on what it is that we say that we want, and then putting the frameworks together to make that happen on a daily basis. So not sacrificing being a dad or a husband or a partner or a business owner or an athlete or a spiritual leader. We believe that you can have it all. And in having it all is creating a very, very clear definition of what that is, getting very clear on the quantifiables of that definition, and then putting that into a habit structure every single day. Again, I don't care what you say that you believe. I was a pastor for 13 years. Some would say that I still am. I know a lot of people that say they believe a lot of things and deny it by their entire lifestyle. You show me what you do, and I will show you what you actually believe to be true about yourself and the possibility and potential that's in front of you. So on the backside of that, I travel the country as a keynote speaker. I think I've been just about every state at this point, over 500 stages over the past 20 years. It's been a really fun time. A lot of what I talk about is, again, this whole idea of pain to power, this idea of show me what you do and I'll show you what you believe, removing emotional constructs from how we make decisions and how we make informed decisions in life and in business. I've been a part of some really cool M&A experiences, just shy of $500 million in mergers and acquisitions that I've assisted with on an interpersonal side for some of the guys who are inside of our programs, connecting them to different C-suite executives, helping to staff, helping to lead organizations, and getting to have a really fun time doing it. The biggest thing, man, is I'm Stetson's dad. And so on a daily basis, that is the greatest gift in my life. So I am one of my son's wrestling coaches, baseball coaches. I'm homeroom dad. I'm on the PTA. I'm the only dad on the PTA, by the way, in the whole school, which is very weird. I will say the moms love it. We have a good time. And that is the thing for me. When I started my company, I did not want it to be at the sacrifice of my son. Yeah. And so many times we say that I'm building like, well, this is all for my kids. My kids are my why. The problem is kids didn't ever ask you to build a business. Kids didn't ever ask you to build a company. And so you working too much and being stressed and money is scarce and everything's tight. Like, and you place that on them and you say, this is all for you. So now they internalize it as it's their fault. Nah. So my son isn't my why. My why is very, very simple. I can. So I do. I'm alive. So I do. And I don't build anything for my son. I build everything with him. So my son travels with me when I speak and it's appropriate. Like he can be out of school. He comes with me. He's been coast to coast. Every one of my business partners knows him well. We do life together. All of our families do life together. If I can't do a deal in front of my son, I'm not doing the deal. If the kind of event that you run is not one that my son can be present at, then I will not speak at it. So I don't miss my son's events. That is the priority for me. I am in an amazing relationship with a woman I love very, very much. We have an amazing life together. And again, I am proof that in 5 years, everything can change and everything can change for the better. You can, again, do any kind of research on me, not to sound really pretentious. I said that the other day to Stetson's teacher because she saw she's like, okay, well, let's embrace the line. And so I try to explain it. And I said, well, it's probably easier. You can if you want to Google me. And my son's mom was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? I'm like, I didn't mean it pretentious, but I write.
It makes things a lot easier though.
I write for Rolling Stone.
Google me makes things a lot easier.
I write for Forbes. I write for Entrepreneur. Yeah. I'm like the first 5 pages of Google. Dude, and that's crazy. Listen, it's wild to me, dude. Like 2016, my last W-2 in the church was $33,000 for the year. We're talking balling on a budget. Yeah. But I didn't know any different. It was fine. And now, I sit on the board of, a few 8-figure companies. We've exited 8 and 9 figures. We've got one that's coming up over the next 5 years that we should be able to get a 10-figure exit on. It is wild to me. Every day I'm like, this is my life. This is absolutely insane. Now I'm able to do the things that I am, and I'm able to create the synergy because I'm very, very clear on the green lights for me. I'm very clear on what my objectives are. I'm very clear on what I want. I'm very clear on what it takes to get there. Very clear on my habit structures. I'm very clear on my priorities, with my family being at the top of that. And so when you can get very, very clear on who it is that you want to become, you get very, very clear on what it is that you want exactly. Don't tell me you just want to make more money. I'll just send you $1 in the mail. I'm your guru. Right? Very clear. And associate that to identity, right? So one of the things that we tell our guys to do is, a lot of guys are like, yeah, I want to lose 20 pounds. I'm like, okay, cool. That's fine. It's great. I get it. You want to get rid of that dad bod. Love it. But then you lose it. Then what? Yeah. So we have to create an identity of this is who I am. So this is what I do. No, I'm an athlete, and this is how athletes perform. This is how I eat. This is how I train. This is how I sleep. This is how I love. This is how I respect myself. Now it's just, I haven't gotten this 20 off yet, but as I do, I'm confirming my identity so that this never changes.
I love that. I love that so much. And that's something that believe in deeply myself with regards to people who are looking to make certain changes. It's like, okay, you can change these things, but are you changing it in a sustainable fashion? Are you changing it in a way that you can maintain? You might want to look good for summer, but are you going to look good the following winter? Because at the end of the day, like the longer term effect is what means way more.
That's it. And so even as a husband or as a father, right? Like, I want to be a good dad. Well, what is a good dad?
Yeah.
What is that?
And are you doing it in a way where, you can continue to be a good dad and not just be a good dad, in the next month or 2 months? Yeah.
Right. I want to build I want to hit 7 figures. I'm like, dude, you make $50,000 a year right now. You don't even know what that means. You have no idea. You just want what you think it's going to make you feel based on what you see other people have.
Yeah. But you don't know the trouble that comes with maintaining 7 figures. You don't know, you don't know the asks that come with maintaining 7 figures. You don't know the stresses. You don't know the demands
on your time, who you have to become, what you need to know, what you need to learn, who you need to hire.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you don't know these things yet, but you start to surround yourself. So for me, one of the catalysts for me was putting myself in the right rooms. In 2017, 2 weeks after I stepped out of ministry, I literally stepped into a conference for entrepreneurs, not knowing anyone. And by the end of that, knowing everyone. Pastor Playbook. Like, I'm going to get to know you and your story. And that has been the catalyst for me, is putting myself in the right rooms, investing in the right rooms. I will pay to play any day of the week to get in the right rooms and to get around the right people so that I can go faster and go further.
Cody, there's so many ways that I can kind of narrow this down, and I want to make sure that I hit something important. So I'm gonna ask you a question, and I'm gonna ask you to answer it however which way you want to.
Okay.
At some point, your son is going to be old enough to digest everything that you had gone through, and he's going to see, the level of tragedy that you had faced during this transitionary period in life.
Yeah.
How do you anticipate that conversation is going to go from a father-son perspective? And what do you want him to remember your journey for, and kind of walk away with long past you're gone?
Yeah, it's a great question. One, I don't know that it'll be a single conversation.
Sure.
I think it'll be a series of conversations and a natural evolution of conversation. One that I'm present to. My son is going to see the shortcomings of a man who is like he is now as he becomes a man. And the hope and my transparency in the ownership of how I've lived my life, the good, the not so great, the learning lessons, is that he takes that and he catalogs it as a field map and as a field journal, a field manual to his own life, that long after I'm gone, he will remember the intentionality, the presence, the certainty, the confidence, the humility, the generosity that his father daily took steps to embody. And even now, when I get things wrong, we talk about it. I want him to know where I'm learning. Even at 8 years old, there are things that he can't comprehend, but there are things that he absolutely can. And he's very, very intelligent. I don't think there's any greater gift that you can give a child than presence and undivided attention, affection, accountability, frameworks. And so for me, those will be the things that I believe that he will carry with him. That his dad was a man of integrity. That his dad saw people, knew people, and loved them enough to push them past their comfort, but never at the sacrifice of his family or his own personal health.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I think, for all the listeners out there, it's really important to understand the time frame of this session does not do justice to Cody's journey. Cody's been through a tremendous amount of growth, transition, reshaping, understanding. He's taken all the adversity he's been through in a short period of time and turned it around in a way where he's truly living out his purpose. And his pit to peak trajectory is extremely unique. So I urge you all to make sure that you look him up after this recording and take note of the example that he's setting and his way of shining a light on this world. Thank you so much for joining today, Cody.
Absolutely. And listen, to the listener, if you want more of this, if you're like, man, like we're just getting started and this has been an hour and we need more, I'll come back on the show and we can chop it up again. You just need to message, and you need to message either Bashor, you need to message me and say, we just listened to it. I got to have more.
I love that.
We get enough.
I'd absolutely love it.
We'll
it would be my pleasure. Thank you.